getting late in the season for summer camp, Jeff. It's technically fall now.
That's true, Ray. It is fall. The kids are all back in school, but this was never a camp for children. I mean, not that children weren't allowed here. They just aren't the target market. And unlike its earliest years, this camp is open in other seasons too.
There's an iron sign over the dirt road in front of us that reads Camp Etna, which makes sense. We're in the northernmost corner of Etna, Maine, right near Etna Pond.
Camp Etna is historic, and it's the perfect place to visit in October.
Now, why October?
Because Camp Etna is one of the oldest spiritualist camps in the nation. We've come here to try and talk to ghosts. Hey, I'm Jeff Belanger.
And I'm Ray Auger. Welcome to episode 367 of the New England Legends podcast. We're always on the hunt for ghosts, monsters, UFOs, true crime, and weird history.
That we are, and most of our story leads come from you, so thank you. And please reach out to us anytime through our website, where you can also find dates for my story tour, dates to see Ray's band, the Pub Kings, and links to everything else we have going on.
We'll head off to Ghost Camp right after a word from our sponsor.
So I want to say right up front that I would imagine our friends at Camp Etna might get offended at the term ghost camp.
Why is that?
Well, because I'm sure they'd prefer the word spirit.
Is there a difference between ghost and spirit?
So I've been known to use the words interchangeably, but for spiritualists, a ghost might represent kind of like a residual haunting, like a movie that plays over and over again. I mean, the person was there, but isn't there now. It's like something left behind, or it might refer to more of like a ghost as an earthbound thing that needs some sort of healing.
Okay, makes sense.
So a spirit would be more of an intelligent and interactive person, just like us. A person who left their physical body behind, but they can come and go as they please.
Got it. So a ghost might sound crude to a devout spiritualist.
Yeah, something like that. We mean no offense. We're still learning.
That we are.
Okay, so all this started, and I mean all of this, not just this spiritualist camp, but all of spiritualism and really psychic readings, ghost hunters, paranormal television, on and on.
I mean, this sounds big.
It's big. It's huge. So, all right, imagine, if you will, a small farmhouse in Hydesville, New York.
Okay.
Small town just about 30 miles east of Rochester. It's March 31st, 1848, and you're in the home of John Fox. He lives there with his wife and 6 children. Now, that evening, 2 of his daughters, Maggie and Kate, heard a knock on the wall.
All right, I'm picturing it.
Easy, right?
Yeah.
So they suspected their house was haunted and that those knocks were a spirit trying to communicate. And they named the entity Mr. Splitfoot. They'd say, "Mr. Splitfoot, do as I do." And they'd knock out a pattern on the wall. And the disembodied knock would repeat the pattern. But pretty quickly, they established their own code. For example, knock once for yes, twice for no, and so on.
If something could directly respond, that would make sense.
Now, by asking a bunch of questions, they figured out that this spirit was a peddler who was murdered years earlier before the Fox family moved in, and his remains were buried on the property. The story goes that within a few days, dozens of people came to the house to witness this miracle, and spiritualism was born.
The Fox sisters went on to become celebrities. They toured theaters, offering public readings. They started a phenomenon. Some claim they were frauds, that they created the knocks by snapping their toes inside of boots to make the sound. There were plenty of skeptics back then, too. And at some point, the Fox sisters said that they were a hoax. Others claim they later recanted that confession because they were afraid of all the negative publicity.
All true. But either way, a giant boulder was thrown into a still pond that day, and we can still see the ripples rolling out. Spiritualism was born, and soon others began to claim they could communicate with spirits. They also offered readings and public displays. Now, I'm sure spiritualism would have probably died out if not for the U.S. Civil War in the 1860s, just a little over a decade after the Fox sisters heard those first knocks.
Now, why the Civil War?
So think about it. You had thousands of people dying untimely deaths. Some soldiers went off to fight. Their families never heard what happened to them. I mean, were they captured? Were they killed? Did they wander off? People needed answers desperately, and when their clergy couldn't satisfy them, they turned to mediums.
I could see that. And I'm sure some of those mediums were ripping off grieving families.
Some were, no doubt. But others were offering some pretty incredible insight. And then soon word spread. Some scientists got interested in studying and testing these mediums. Psychical research was born, which was the precursor to ghost hunting, and then eventually paranormal television, and so on.
Got it.
And spiritualist communities sprang up all over the place. Camp Etna here in Maine was just one of them. It was established in 1876 when a group of spiritualists gathered here by Etna Pond to commune with each other and talk to spirits. Now, what started as tents turned into small wooden structures and eventually cottages. And pretty soon they had 27 acres of land. Camp Etna peaked in the early 1900s when there were 130 cottages here. People came from all over the region to experience the vibe and maybe get a message from a loved one on the other side. So let's head back to the year 1910 and talk to ghosts.
It's August of 1910 here at Camp Etna in Maine. President Howard Taft is in the White House. Has Anyone Seen Kelly by Nora Bayes is the #1 song. It's a prosperous time for the country. Here at Camp Etna, folks are lined up to meet and hear the camp's most famous medium, Mary Scannell.
Mary's 43 years old. She was born in West Mansfield, Massachusetts, and her mother died when she was only 3 years old. Now, when Mary was 15 years old, she was living in Narragansett, Massachusetts, and it was there that she experienced her first vision while staying at a friend's house. Mary had just gone to bed. So, Mary, what did you see?
I had retired, but was still wide awake. I became aware of a human form in the room, near the bed. There was something about it that differed from the persons I knew, and I screamed. When I later described the person I had seen, the family there said I had described one of their relatives, who had died. This was a person I had never seen, nor even heard of.
The owners of the house stirred. They had only ever heard of table tipping as a means of spirit communication, so they held a seance. The table thumped and bumped and spelled out Mary's mother's name letter by letter. Then the spirit of a Native American girl named Bright Eyes came through. Bright Eyes told those gathered in the seance that Mary was to remain in the house for 3 months and study mediumship.
Bright Eyes is my spirit guide. She's been with me ever since.
For the next 6 years, Mary mostly gave private seances. She had her mediumship tested too. During one public reading in New Bedford, Massachusetts, a skeptic scoffed at her and her so-called spirit guide. That's when Bright Eyes spoke through Mary and told this skeptic, "I know you. You took my picture." Then she gave details on how, when he was out west, this man had photographed a small Indian girl. The skeptic was indeed out west with his camera years back. When he went home, he looked through his negatives and found the image of a young girl just as she said he would. He printed the image and gave it to Mary. The skeptic became a believer, and Mary now carries the picture in a locket around her neck.
Mary Scannell's been touring New England for years and has built quite a following. One of her biggest admirers is none other than Dr. Isaac Funk from the Funk and Wagnalls Publishing Company. He spent years corresponding with Mary and interviewing her in person. 3 years ago, he published a book called The Psychic Riddle that featured many testimonials from various people who had readings by Mary. Here at Camp Etna, Mary's as famous as it gets. In fact, she's the president of the camp and now considers this her home base.
And being famous means famous people seek out her readings. Mary is doing well financially. And when she's here at Camp Etna, the crowds flow in to hear her speak. Wow, there's thousands of people here today, each one of them hoping for some pearl of wisdom or maybe even a message from a loved one.
Mary doesn't disappoint either. Her message is simple, that life continues after bodily death, that we can take comfort, we can still communicate with those who have passed on, and one day we too will be able to send a message to those we've left behind. And that brings us back to today. Mary served as president of Camp Etna until her death in 1918, and Camp Etna continued. In 1922, a massive fire destroyed more than half the camp, but the spiritualists pressed on. Camp Etna is still doing the work it's done for almost a century and a half.
Given the signs out front, you can get a reading here almost any time by appointment, and they still hold services on Sundays. I wonder what that's like.
So I talked to my buddy, Reverend Tim Shaw. He's a spiritualist minister and psychic medium. He's based in Western New York. And Tim told me that a spiritualist service is a lot like a Christian or Unitarian church service. There's music and songs, readings, fellowship. Someone gives a talk or a lecture, and then a medium or mediums will go around and offer messages. Now, Tim explained at some of the spiritualist churches and camps he's spoken at, he's been asked to give 3 messages in the span of about 12 minutes. And often there are 2 other mediums at the same time doing the same thing. So the Spirit may move Tim towards someone in the congregation, and he'll ask, "Hey, can I give you a message?" If the person says okay, Tim passes along the message. There might be a follow-up question or 2, but that's it. This isn't a sit-down reading. Just a message, and then they move on.
I can imagine, especially for those who get a meaningful message, that it can be pretty validating for your faith. To hear something specific only you could know, that would be profound.
Yeah, wouldn't it be?
When I sat through Catholic Mass as a kid, we got songs and then we got a sermon for everyone. Maybe it resonated with you, maybe it didn't. I can only imagine what it would have been like had the priest said, "Ray, your grandmother wants you to stop giving your mom such a hard time, eat your green beans, and sit up straight at dinner."
Wouldn't that be something? And that brings us to After the Legend, where we take a closer look at this week's story and sometimes veer off course.
After the Legend is brought to you by our Patreon patrons. We can't say enough about our patrons. We can't do what we do without them. Bringing you 2 episodes each week takes a lot of time and money. Our patrons help with our hosting costs and production costs, our marketing, and everything else it takes. It's only $3 per month, and for that, you get early ad-free access to new episodes, plus bonus episodes and content that no one else gets to hear. Please help the cause by going to patreon.com/New England Legends to sign up. We'd certainly appreciate it.
And to see some pictures of Camp Etna and some historic photos as well, click on the link in our episode description, go to our website, and click on episode 367. Did you ever get a reading from a psychic?
I guess unofficially. I used to produce a medium show at the radio station on Saturday mornings. So a little tidbits here and there, but I never really sat down, gave my money, my hands or whatever for the palms. I don't know how they do it.
Did you get any message on those little tidbits?
I did. I can't remember exactly what it was, but there was a letter involved, and it made my knees weak, where I was standing at the time, and I almost fell over.
So it felt for real?
Oh, it felt for real.
Okay.
Yeah. And it was weird because, we've talked about this before.
Sure.
How the guys that are scammers can easily figure out what means something to you.
It's a cold
they keep
reading.
Digging and digging, and then they pull things out. They're just smart that way. This felt different. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was like, wow, how would she know that?
Sure. And nothing to gain. I mean, you were just her producer.
That's it. Yeah.
Like you had.
She's not trying to impress me. I have to see her next week. So why would she try to swindle me?
Right.
I'm not paying for it.
I mean, gosh, this was decades ago. I was doing a feature on psychics for a newspaper I was working on. And I literally stopped in off the street, one of those neon signs, psychic readings here. You know what I mean? And the gags are running through my head, like I should open the door and she'd be like, yes, of course, I was expecting you, right on time,
Yeah.
There should be no wait because she knew I was coming.
Or your first question is, what are the lotto numbers for tonight? How are the Pats going to do this weekend?
Doesn't work that way. That's what they always say. So I sat down and I had a reading and I paid her. And she did some tarot cards and then she looked at my palms and stuff. And it was so generic. It was absolutely meaningless. It was just like, oh, you're going to be really rich one day. Well, I'm still waiting. Like
should go back to her now.
Yeah, I'd be like, hey, it's not here yet.
When is this going to happen?
Yeah. Rich in love. You know what I mean? Like, oh, okay. So it was very generic. It was very, and then I remember her saying like, you should wear the color blue. That's your color and it resonates with you.
Got a blue sweatshirt on.
I do have a blue sweatshirt on right now.
And a blue shirt. And blue jeans.
Wow,
it's very blue of you.
And I'm still waiting for the riches. So that was that. And now that being said, I'm friendly with some pretty famous psychic mediums who have TV shows and stuff. And I've learned a lot because I was asked. I'm like, I don't think I have it, and they say, well, of course you do to some degree. Like we have intuition. Yeah, yes. Intuition, empathy. Those are all parts of it. Where you see someone crying and you're just like, oh, I'm sad because I see this person sad. Even if it's a stranger, you're just like kind of inclined to be like, are you okay? Is there something I can help with?
Right.
Because you're a decent person and you're picking up on their emotions and you're tuning in.
You're emotionally open.
Right. You have to be. Right. You have to allow stuff to come in. And so I get that and I understand that. And you've got gut feelings and all that other stuff. But to directly communicate with a spirit, and that's one of the questions I've asked too. It's just like, if my grandfather's coming through to you, why can't he say like, this is my name? This is the address that I lived at where you used to come and remember, we'd give you cheese just before you'd even get out of the car because you loved cheese.
Specific details.
Like highly specific details that I haven't talked about. The cheese thing is out now. So like, don't, anyone who drops that, I'm like, you heard the podcast. So that could be, why is it not like that? And it's been explained to me that it's not usually words. It's sort of like images. I can describe what I see. I can describe like, he's dressed like this. He's got a scar or a tattoo or something. I can describe images that I'm being shown. And then that either means something to you or it doesn't.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, I get it. He said, I wish I could just be handed a letter that I could read to you. But
maybe Wi-Fi's bad or psychic Wi-Fi's bad in that area. And you're just getting little pieces here and there.
I don't know, but I get it. And so I get the sense that we probably all have some sort of that.
I do feel it.
And I'm sure you've been in a building, especially like an old creepy one, where sometimes you're just like, oh, I feel like maybe you're not alone.
Something's wrong.
So if you have that feeling that you're not alone, isn't that sort of psychic?
Yeah.
Because otherwise you'd be like, I feel nothing. So what? It's a decrepit old building and it's dark, but
And that spirit is trying to communicate with you. If you're feeling it,
Maybe.
it's communicating with you.
Yeah, and maybe you just don't have the ability to open enough to see it, feel it, hear it.
Right, where some others may.
But yeah, you're just sort of sensing it.
Well, we've talked about this before,
yeah.
and we use like 10% of our brain. There's
Right.
90% that we don't know much about up
Sure.
there. And one of those components could be the ability to communicate. Not just with the living. Maybe we could, with that 90%, just think
Right.
and hear each other, but we could be connected to that other realm.
So I know, like, there's been studies. Princeton, the Princeton Anomalies Research Lab, the PAIR lab. I think it's since shut down, unfortunately. But they did studies on telepathy and things like that. The idea that two living people could send messages to each other. And come on, we do that all the time. Someone will say something, and you just look at your friend, and you're just like, you don't have to say it. You're like, yeah, like,
Oh, sure.
some
Yeah, yeah.
stupid inside joke, but you know it, and you look at them, and you're just like,
Yep.
That's telepathy.
Absolutely.
Words weren't said, but you both knew exactly what.
You're on the same wavelength.
Yeah.
We say that all the time. Oh, we're
Yeah.
clicking on the same wavelength.
So if you have telepathy with a living person, maybe it's not so much of a stretch that if there's some intelligent entity floating nearby, you could have telepathy with that
Yeah.
as well.
Some kind of energy.
Yeah.
We have energy, and spirits might have the same energy. We just can't see it.
So these spiritualist camps, Lilydale in New York, which is south of Buffalo, so the Fox sisters were in Hydesville, right, which is sort of near Rochester. Their original farmhouse was moved all the way over to Lilydale, but then it burned down. Someone burned it, and so it's gone. In Hydesville, there's still a park where the Fox sisters, land was, and then Lilydale is this big spiritualist community, just like Camp Etna.
Yeah.
But Lilydale is probably the most famous because they had the house at one point. But these spiritualist camps did pop up. I know there's one in Florida. They're around, But Etna is a big one, super famous, been there a long time, and people still go. You go there and you'll get psychic readings. You'll go to the church service or whatever. And I think people go there because they really want to have that validation. They want to have some sort of, connection. And at places like that, sometimes they find it. There's, talking to my buddy Tim Shaw, he was telling me about, because he goes to these, so he'll be in residence for like a weekend or something, like he'll get brought in for that. And I'm like, I kind of want to see it. You know what I mean? I want to go do a weekend, and just see what that's like, and then,
Or how you feel being there.
well, right?
It could be the epicenter of spiritual activity.
Right. Yeah, I'd be curious. I would be curious.
Maybe it's not the individual, but it's the place itself. So you walk in, all of a sudden you become a spiritualist.
This is still a religion. It's a belief system, and there's plenty of people that consider themselves spiritualists. Now, the good news is you can be a Christian and a spiritualist. You can be a Jewish person and a spiritualist.
You don't have to get on your knees every Sunday.
No, it's not. You can. All are welcome.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're like, whatever. You can be both. It's okay.
Right.
You can be Muslim and believe.
Probably one of the only quote unquote religions that allow that.
Yeah. Well, Unitarians say the same thing. They're like, you can be a Jewish Unitarian. You can be a Catholic Unitarian. It's all good. They're not asking you to forego other things to be this. You can just add this on. Is how they look at it. Now, that's not to say certain religions don't frown on it. They do. There's certain specific, like sects of Christianity that would say, don't you dare consult with spiritualists. No, it's here. It's the Bible or nothing. But others are a little more open-minded. That, hey, we don't have all the answers, and whatever you get in that good stuff, it's okay. So Camp Etna, thankfully, still rolling after, almost 150 years.
Before we let you go, make sure that you subscribe to our podcast because it's free. Just search for New England Legends wherever you get your podcasts and tell a friend or two about us. Post a link on your social media or shout it from the rooftop.
New England Legends!
There you go. It all helps us out a lot because the more people who listen and share, the more story leads that come in.
Would like to thank Lisa Strakowski for lending her voice acting talents this week. You can see Lisa performing as the maid in Dracula at the Strand Theater in Dover, New Hampshire this month. Performances are the weekend of the 18th and 25th. We'll have a link on our website where you can click over. Thank you so much to our sponsors and our Patreon patrons. And our theme music is by John Judd.
Until next time, remember,
The bizarre is closer than you think.